I was flipping burgers barefoot on our front lawn while my daughter sold glitter lemonade 3 feet away, when a man in a knockoff tactical vest marched up, slapped a red eviction notice on our door, and barked, "You've got 72 hours to vacate, or we escort you out." I blinked, still holding a spatula, as he added, "Per HOA Order 47C, you're in violation of code, unauthorized gatherings, non-compliant driveway color, and public nuisance. That includes the lemonade stand." My daughter started crying. My wife dropped her gardening gloves. "And the man?" He smirked, tapped his sunglasses like he was auditioning for SWAT, and strutted off like a peacock with a power complex. That was the moment I knew my quiet life was officially over. 2 months ago, we'd moved to Everglade Hills, a suburban haven promising peace and cookie-cutter civility. It was supposed to be a fresh start. After years on the road, years spent with the same rowdy men who had once nicknamed me Jackknife, I wanted calm. Safety. Lemonade stands, quiet nights, no sirens. My wife supported me. My daughter had friends on the block within days. We planted tomatoes. I fixed the fence. I even helped our neighbor install a porch swing. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the Homeowners Association cops. They called themselves the Enforcement Committee, but let's be honest, they were 3 bored men in their 40s who'd found power in laminated badges and poorly fitting cargo pants. Vince was their ringleader. Bald, red-nosed, and barrel-chested like a disgraced cartoon sheriff, he introduced himself on day 1 by measuring my grass with a ruler and informing me the acceptable limit was 1.75 inches. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. He did not. I should have known then. The escalation began slowly. First, it was a warning for having a non-standard mailbox flag. Then, a citation for parking our truck too far to the left. We moved it. They came back and said it was too far to the right. The real kicker? We were renting. The house owner was overseas, and the HOA had suddenly rewritten the bylaws while half the board was on vacation. There was no warning. No meeting. Just a new, paper-clipped version of rules thicker than my wife's baking book. And Vince? He was now the president, treasurer, and chief enforcement officer of the HOA. All self-appointed. After the eviction notice, I marched to the HOA office. It wasn't a real office, just a prefab trailer on the edge of the neighborhood with faded flags and a cracked window labeled Resident Compliance Center. I knocked. Vince opened the door with a meatball sub in one hand and a walkie-talkie in the other. "Afternoon," he said, chewing. "Violation appeals are held every other Thursday, assuming there's quorum." "It's Monday," I replied. "And this eviction is bogus." "No, sir, it's binding. You see, Chapter 6B, Subsection 4 says." "You made that up 2 weeks ago." "Actually, we ratified it during our emergency garden ordinance vote." "You missed it. You posted that notice behind the gas station at midnight." "Transparency is a pillar of the HOA," he said with a smile, then slammed the door. That evening, we tried calling the HOA hotline. It went straight to voicemail. My wife suggested we talk to other residents. Maybe we weren't alone. Turns out we weren't. 4 families had been evicted in the past month. All newcomers. All renters. One man had lived here with his mother, an elderly woman who'd collapsed while packing their things. Another had gotten a $4,000 fine for putting up a "Happy Birthday" sign in his front yard. Everyone was afraid to fight back. Vince had filed police reports against one family claiming they threatened enforcement officers, and the cops sided with him because of his official-looking documents. I sat on our porch swing that night with a beer in hand and stared at the eviction notice like it had personally insulted my grandmother. My daughter had gone quiet. My wife was checking rental listings, tears welling in her eyes. And me? I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A hum. A low, dangerous vibration deep in my ribs. The last time I'd felt that, I was riding full throttle through a desert thunderstorm with my crew at my back and a trail of dust 50 miles wide behind us. I had buried that man for my family. But now, that man was knocking. I stood up, went inside, and opened a drawer I hadn't touched in 5 years. Inside, under a pile of old receipts, was a dusty burner phone. I charged it, turned it on, and scrolled through numbers that hadn't rung in a decade. Then I called one. It rang once. Twice. Then a gravel voice answered. "If you're calling, it's serious." "It's time," I said. There was a pause. "You want us to ride?" "Yeah." Another pause. "Address?" I gave it. "Be there by morning." I hung up, set the phone down, and took a long breath. My wife stood in the hallway, staring. She hadn't heard that voice in years. I met her eyes. "They messed with the wrong lemonade stand," I said. The next morning, I woke to the sound of engines. Not lawnmowers. Not delivery trucks. Engines, growling, synchronized, and relentless. I stepped outside barefoot again, spatula still in hand, and there they were. 12 bikes lined the street like steel stallions in a formation that could scare off a SWAT team. Some men wore denim. Some leather. A few wore shirts that barely held their beer guts. But they all had one thing in common: they were my brothers. The same brothers I'd left behind to become a quiet man. Vince's face turned the color of wet chalk as he peeked from behind a bush. The street was quiet, except for the heavy purring of motorcycles and the distant sound of a wind chime somewhere committing an HOA infraction. One of the bikers stepped forward. Big guy. Gray beard. Leather vest that read. "Retired. Not tame. Jackknife," he said, grinning. "Nice lawn. Terrible management." I nodded. "Time for some neighborhood improvement." And that's when the real fun began. The neighborhood didn't wake up to birdsong that morning. It woke up to thunder. Not from clouds or weather, but from 12 V-twin engines roaring in a synchronized rhythm that made windows rattle and coffee mugs vibrate off counters. The first to peek through their blinds were the retired couples. Then came the early walkers, dog leashes hanging limp as they stood slack-jawed watching chrome beasts roll through the cul-de-sac like a slow-motion rebellion. Every engine gleamed. Every rider had their vest on. Some wore leather cracked from years of weather, others had denim patched with places most of these neighbors had only seen on postcards or prison documentaries. At the front was Nails, 6'4" with a gray ponytail, sunglasses that had no business being that cool at 7 a.m., and a belt buckle that looked like it had knocked out a tooth or two. Jack stood at the center of his lawn, arms folded, a cup of coffee in one hand and a quiet smirk on his face. Ella ran out barefoot and squealed. The biggest biker, a guy named Chainsaw with a beard like a forest fire, leaned off his bike and handed her a brand new helmet covered in pink stickers. She gasped. Katie peeked out from the porch, one hand over her mouth, the other clutching a gardening trowel like she wasn't sure if this was real or some wonderfully bizarre dream. Then, as if on cue, Vince's voice cut through the morning like a blender in a church. "This is an HOA-managed community. These motorcycles are in direct violation of the noise ordinance listed under Code 18A, Section 4. He came stomping out from the corner in his usual outfit, combat boots polished to the point of comedy, fake badge flapping on his chest, clipboard in hand like it was a sword of law. Rick and Barry flanked him like mutts on a leash. Jack walked toward him with calm steps. "Morning, Vince. Hope you slept well. Thought I'd introduce you to some of my family." Vince didn't answer. His eyes moved from Jack to the bikers to the neighbors watching from their lawns. He started speaking again, faster this time. "These vehicles are not approved by the HOA. Their presence constitutes an unauthorized gathering. You are subject to immediate citation and possible removal." Nails dismounted his bike slowly, stretched his arms like a man who had just conquered Everest, and walked right up to Vince. He leaned in until the two were eye level, and said, "You're wearing a plastic badge, standing in a neighborhood, pretending you're the law. That's either a sad hobby or a midlife crisis gone nuclear." Vince took a step back and pointed at his clipboard. "I'm authorized." "By who?" Nails asked. "Your reflection?" Before Vince could answer, Rick tried to play tough guy and reached for a walkie-talkie on his shoulder. Jack smiled and said, "Go ahead, call it in." They did. They actually called the sheriff's office. Which, for them, turned out to be their next big mistake. A few miles away, in a quiet little station on the edge of town, the dispatcher picked up the incoming call. She was sipping coffee and scrolling through a cat video when the report came in. "Yeah, this is Officer Vincent, HOA enforcement. We've got an unauthorized motorcycle gang on Evergreen Circle. 12 suspects. Possibly armed. Non-compliant." The woman on the other end nearly spit her drink. "Did you say Evergreen Circle?" "Yes, ma'am. We need backup." She pressed the mute button. Then she turned to the sheriff, who was halfway through his donut. Sir? Vince from Everglade Hills says a biker gang is staging an invasion." The sheriff raised one brow, wiped powdered sugar from his shirt, and said, "Did he mention Jack?" "Yup. Jack's involved." He stood, chuckled, and grabbed his hat. "Let's go make some neighborhood peace." By the time Sheriff Daniels pulled up, Vince had worked himself into a sweaty panic, pacing in circles, talking into a dead radio. The sheriff stepped out of his cruiser like he was arriving at a Sunday cookout. He shook Jack's hand, nodded to the crew, and looked Vince dead in the eye. "Son, I know we let y'all run your own HOA show out here, but I'm gonna say this once. Dressing up like the cops makes people nervous. Filing fake citations is fraud. Trying to tow trucks without a court order is theft. And calling in a fake emergency? That's obstruction." Vince's mouth opened, then closed. Then opened again, but nothing came out. Sheriff Daniels continued. "Now I know Jack. I know his crew. You ever hear of Biker Battalion Bravo? These boys volunteered during Hurricane Ella. They cleared roads and delivered insulin to seniors while half the town sat in darkness. The neighborhood was silent. These fellas are heroes. And you? You're a guy with a laminated badge trying to evict a family over the color of their garage." Jack nodded toward Sheriff Daniels. "Appreciate you, Sheriff. We'll keep it peaceful." Daniels tipped his hat. "Long as the barbecue's open, I might grab a plate." That evening, the neighborhood looked different. Kids rode bikes. Parents actually left their houses. Neighbors came out to meet the bikers. Chainsaw was fixing a lawnmower. Red was teaching a kid how to shine chrome. Jack was flipping burgers, smiling wide for the first time in weeks. The HOA patrol had vanished. But Jack wasn't done. He had a plan. One that involved cameras, receipts, and exposing Vince's petty empire for what it really was, a fraudulent cash grab wrapped in faux authority. He didn't want revenge. He wanted reform. But first, he wanted the HOA to make one more mistake. And just before midnight they did. Rick and Barry returned, skulking like raccoons with cans of spray paint. What they didn't know was that Jack's crew had installed motion-sensitive cameras with full night vision. The moment they lifted their arms to vandalize the garage, the camera activated. Even better? Rick dropped his wallet. Right there in the bushes. Jack didn't confront them. Not yet. He simply sent the footage to a USB stick, walked into his garage, and plugged it into a projector. Then he smiled. Tomorrow, he'd host a public movie screening. One that no one in the neighborhood would forget. Not even the HOA. Because the credits were going to roll with two very familiar faces. The next morning, lawn chairs appeared faster than gossip. Every family within 5 blocks rolled out something: blankets, folding seats, even a few hammocks. Kids held popcorn. Dogs wagged their tails. Jack had taped a white bedsheet to his garage door and set up the projector just as the sun climbed above the rooftops. His biker crew stood behind the grill, flipping sausages and pouring lemonade. One of them, Red, had on a custom apron that read, HOA, Hamburger Obliteration Association. Even the most skeptical neighbors, those who used to cross the street to avoid Jack, were now lined up for ribs. Jack stood on a cooler and raised a paper cup. "Before we begin, let me thank everyone for showing up today. No HOA violations will be written. No citations will be issued. And the only thing we're towing today is your taste buds. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Vince, Rick, and Barry were nowhere to be seen. Their houses had their blinds shut so tight it looked like the sun had personally offended them. Then Jack hit play. The footage rolled. It showed Rick and Barry sneaking through the shadows like overgrown possums. The camera, positioned high on a tree, had a perfect angle. Barry stumbled, then tried to kick a garden gnome. Rick took out a can of spray paint, shook it menacingly, and shouted, "Neighborhood justice!" as he lunged toward the garage. But instead of tagging Jack's door, he sprayed directly onto his own car parked nearby. The camera zoomed in, license plate and all. Barry slipped and fell into the rose bush. Rick dropped his wallet. Then they both panicked and ran, tripping over a flower bed and shattering 2 solar lights in the process. The crowd burst out laughing. Even old man Fletcher, who hadn't smiled since Nixon resigned, wheezed so hard his wife smacked his back. Jack paused the footage. Now some of you may be wondering, why show this? Simple. Because the same men threatening to fine your kids for sidewalk chalk are also out here defacing private property, trespassing, and running this neighborhood like a playground dictatorship. He clicked the remote. A second video began, screen captures of bank statements. Names blacked out for privacy, except Vince's. Multiple transfers from the HOA fund labeled compliance equipment, enforcement fuel stipend, and morale bonus. Jack turned to the crowd. Tell me, folks, how many of you voted for a morale bonus? No hands went up. A few jaws did drop. Then came the last clip. Vince himself, in front of the HOA trailer, coaching Rick and Barry through a mock eviction rehearsal. Jack had installed a wireless mic near the mailboxes. Vince's voice came through clearly. Remember, act serious. Point to the codebook. Make eye contact. Most of these people are too scared to push back. The screen went black. Jack stepped off the cooler. Not anymore. At that exact moment, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Out stepped Sheriff Daniels, calm as ever. He walked straight through the crowd, nodded at Jack, then knocked on Vince's door. Silence. He knocked again. Vince, this is your one and only invitation to open the door before I let Chainsaw do it. The blinds parted a crack. Then the door creaked open. Vince stepped out, wearing his full faux cop outfit, but with bedhead and a breakfast stain on his fake badge. I don't understand. This is all a misunderstanding. The sheriff held up a thick manila folder. Forgery. Misuse of HOA funds. Filing false documents. Impersonating an officer. And my personal favorite, criminal trespassing while wearing mall cop cosplay. Rick and Barry appeared on the porch like defeated raccoons, one still covered in rose scratches. The sheriff turned to them. Gentlemen, I believe you've left your dignity somewhere near a gnome. He cuffed all three. As they were led to the cruiser, a kid in the crowd yelled, Hey Vince, want a lemonade? That single sentence made the entire street erupt with laughter. With Vince gone, the question turned to what came next. The HOA board technically still existed, but no one trusted it. That afternoon, an emergency neighborhood meeting was held. Jack was nominated to lead. He declined immediately. I'm not the kind of guy you want in charge, he said. I punch problems, not paperwork. Instead, he pointed to his wife. But she is. Katie reads contracts for fun, knows how to plant peace where chaos lives, and already memorized the HOA bylaws, backwards. There was no debate. Katie was voted in unanimously. She stood tall, brushed her hands on her jeans, and said, First order of business, we're burning the fake bylaw book. Second, no more dress-up enforcers. And third, lemonade stands are now community events. That evening, a barbecue turned into a block party. Music played. Jack and his crew manned the grill. Ella ran around handing out glitter lemonade. Sheriff Daniels stayed for dessert and played horseshoes with Chainsaw. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years started chatting. Fences that had divided yards now had holes cut in them for shared gardens. The HOA trailer was quietly towed away. Later, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the last burger was eaten, Jack sat on the porch with a beer in hand. His crew was packing up. Chainsaw waved. Back to the road? Yeah, Jack said. But next time you call, I expect dessert. Nails pointed at Jack's daughter. Tell her the helmet better get used. Ella saluted. As the engines rolled away, one by one, neighbors stood to wave goodbye. No fear. No tension. Just appreciation. The peace Jack had wanted wasn't found in silence. It was found in standing up when the quiet was being abused. Katie sat beside him and leaned on his shoulder. Think we're done? Jack looked out at the clean street, the laughter, the chalk drawings on the sidewalk spelling freedom in 8 different colors. For now, he said. But if another fake cop shows up. Katie smiled. We call the grill gang? Jack raised his cup. Some neighborhoods had watch groups. His? They had a biker gang that barbecued better than justice ever tasted.